Writing Dracula, Bram Stoker came across an important source of European vampire superstitions. It was a book called Land Beyond the Forest, the English translation of Transylvania. Now contained in the borders of present-day Romania, Transylvania was an isolated country, ringed by rugged mountains. Stoker discovered that stories of vampires had been told here for centuries. Since before the Middle Ages, gypsies and peasants told tales of the evil Nosferatu. These undead blood drinkers were human in appearance. Their bite could turn their victims into vampires like themselves. The vampire stories that originated in Transylvania were stories to explain the unexplainable. Up to Stoker's own time, death and disease were viewed here with ignorance and superstition. Disease hysterias were common. Those thought responsible were branded as vampires, even after they were dead and buried.
When somebody was suspect that they were doing some harm to the village or the villagers, they would open the casket, and in those days there was no embalming, and the very process of the decomposition of the body makes the faces bloat so they look full. Some of the blood backs up from some of the internal organs, so it would be very natural for blood to appear around the mouth. And so, 2 and 2 is 5. Oh, that person must have been out, feeding upon the living.
To ultimately ensure that the vampire could not return, the legend said that the corpse could be decapitated or burned. But there was another method Stoker found in his research that would become the image most identifying with keeping the undead where they belong.
One of the ways of dealing with the vampire was keeping it in the grave. And one of the ways you kept it in the grave was by pinning it to the ground with a stake. The idea was to keep the body in the ground.
As these pagan folk tales began to spread throughout the rest of Christian Europe in the 1600s, Christian symbols were enlisted to fight the vampire. Christians did not necessarily believe in the legends of the Nosferatu, but if true, they'd best be ready. The stake to destroy the vampire should be made of oak, the wood from which the cross of Christ was supposedly made. Sacred artifacts like the crucifix should make them helpless. What Christianity could not defeat was the myth itself. Vampires were still blamed for plagues and epidemics. The stories became even more overwhelming when they were connected to people who had a real taste for